You have high illiteracy, you have high attrition rates, you have a population that has really suffered under decades of warfare and destruction. I think that this is really more about helping the Afghans get the capacities, not about blaming Karzai.
All right, Mr. Volker, thank you very much for coming along and talking with Al Jazeera.
Thank you very much.
Now, just moments ago, the United States vetoed a United Nations resolution that would have condemned Israel's settlements as illegal. And these are live pictures coming to us from the United Nations in New York. The 14 other Security Council members voted in favor of the resolution, which would have called for an immediate halt to all settlement building. The Palestinians say that they will not resume peace talks until Israel halts settlement building in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, which it wants as its capital. Now it's back to Barbara in London.
Daljit, thank you. We'll get a little bit more from you from the United States a little later in the program. Now we're going to take a quick break. Still to come after that, though. Taking steps towards stability. G20 finance ministers arrive in Paris for talks on the global economy. And homeward bound, why Japan's whaling fleet is heading back to port.
He's taken stolen goods and he's now dumping them onto the world without any sort of consideration for consequences.
From people making the news.
If the North will be saved a lot of trouble, I think it is important that they should come together.
To those it affects.
We do accept that there was very bad mistakes made in our banking area.
Behind the headlines.
Most South Koreans are not interested in reunification.
Is the inside story. At this time on Al Jazeera.
As geeks take on dictators, bloggers turn dissidents, and social networks root for social justice, governments are going cyber, spying on their citizens, erecting firewalls like iron curtains, and closing down websites. We ask, is cyber-generated change virtual or real? Empire at this time on Al Jazeera.
Hello there, welcome back. Here's a reminder of our top stories. Bahrain's king has asked his crown prince to start national dialogue with all parties over the continuing unrest in the country. That's after security forces fired on the crowds. There's been more violence during democracy demonstrations in Yemen as well. 6 people have now died, dozens more are injured. And at least 24 people are reported to have died in clashes in Libya over the past 2 days. Protests have continued over Muammar Gaddafi's leadership. Well, one eyewitness in Benghazi has spoken to Al Jazeera about what he saw in the city's hospital.
The situation in Benghazi is very bad. The death toll is more than 70. With my very eyes, I saw more than 70 bodies in hospital, and people are allowed to go into the place where the bodies are kept in order to identify them. And the people who were demonstrating, when they tried to stage a sit-in outside the security unit, the security shot at them. There were many injuries. Many people were still on the ground suffering from their injuries, and the security personnel prevented the ambulances from getting to them. There is loss of security in some areas because of the prisoners that were let out.
An eyewitness speaking to us a little bit earlier, and that same eyewitness told Al Jazeera that the police and security forces have withdrawn from 4 cities and that the people have now taken over. However, we cannot substantiate those claims. The British government has announced it will review a recent decision to sell arms to Bahrain. Reports suggest weapons from Britain may have been used by Bahrain's army to crack down on protesters. That's led the British Foreign Ministry to announce that it's reviewing its export licenses to the kingdom. Sonia Gallego has more.
Images that shocked a nation. pictures of police in Bahrain violently suppressing peaceful protests drew condemnation from the West.
Across the Middle East, we call for the right to peaceful protest and, of course, effective economic development and more open and flexible political systems.
But no mention that some of the tear gas used in the Bahrain protests may have come from Britain. Calls for peace are far away from the gritty reality that is the weapons trade. Deals cut at arms fairs such as these are the norm, reaping billions of dollars for defense contractors. Across the Middle East, arms sales are a lucrative trade for the UK. As well as tear gas, they provided Bahrain with aircraft cannons and assault rifles. For Libya, projectile launchers and crowd-controlled ammunition were approved for sale. Deals to Algeria included combat and military utility helicopters worth $430 million. Egypt's list included components for armoured personnel carriers and submachine guns. And for Saudi Arabia, sniper rifles and small arms ammunition were among last year's sales. Britain is currently the 5th largest seller of weapons in the world, and that potentially conflicts with its diplomatic standing.
The weapons they're selling are likely to be used. The people who want to buy the weapons generally want to use them. And this is the nature of the arms trade that the government has given such a heavy commitment to supporting.
And while the weapons trade provides such a profitable paycheck, there may be hesitation to clamp down on it. The UK has placed sales of arms to Bahrain under urgent review. But until it stops arming governments with the means to crush dissent, critics say its calls for democracy may sound a little hollow to those suffering the end result. Sonia Gallego, Al Jazeera, London.
Let's go to Uganda now, where polls have closed after a day of voting in the country's presidential elections. It's expected that Yoweri Museveni will extend his 25-year grip on power. Mohamed Ado reports now from Kampala.
The Ugandan military on patrol in the east of the country. They were called in to end the fighting between supporters of Uganda's defense minister, Beatrice Wabudea, and her parliamentary opponent, Nandala Mafabi. Journalists were caught up in the violence. This reporter was shot by security forces. Julius Odeke says he was shot when he refused to hand over his camera.
The windows were closed. I refused to open. At last I had a gunshot and I started feeling myself paralyzed. I saw blood.
And in the capital, Kampala, vote counting commenced immediately polling stations closed. Here, opposition supporters cheer every vote for President Museveni's opponents. Tempers flared earlier on in the day when most voting booths did not open on time.
Uganda is a fledgling democracy, and this is just its 6th election in 49 years. And presented with the opportunity to vote once again, many Ugandans are doing so with a deep conviction.
I voted for Museveni straight away. He has given us peace.
With the BSJ going through, corruption will have an end. We shall have more drugs in hospitals, better roads than we have.
Kizza Besigye, President Museveni's most formidable challenger, says he doesn't trust the country's election commission. He plans to do his